Okay, we're back to our door. I'm Greg Bull, a technical advisor here at Goujon Brothers, and we're doing another detail on the door. The window ledge, as I'm going to call it here on our door, has nice detail on this end. The other end is not quite so nice. There's some broken or cracked pieces that will need to get fixed. So my idea is to do a little splash mold or a small mold off of this end, and then use that to recreate the shape 2 or 3 times across the window frame. To make my mold surface, I'm just going to use some packaging tape, clear packaging tape, and put over my surfaces. I'll have to make sure that I tuck it into the 90-degree corners so I don't end up with a bridged or a radiused corner. I've got some putty knives that I can use to kind of force it into the corners in that as I'm putting it on. So I'll cut my first little piece of tape here. Then I'm going to start working it down. I am going to come out over this edge where it won't be really supported, just so I have a surface to let a little bit of runoff epoxy, thickened epoxy go to. So I'm going to start here. Then I'm going to tuck it into this corner. And use the putty knife to kind of work it out through my radius that's here. So use the putty knife again. Now for my actual mold surface will just be from this upper edge down to the bottom of this 90 here. So I don't have to worry about a bunch of the other finer detail below it. Then I'm going to actually lap over my tape by just a little bit. Tuck it in the 90 up here. Roll it down on the radius into the next 90. And that should do it. So I've got some mixed epoxy here. I'm using my 105 resin with my 205 Fast Hardener, and I'm using 406. I want to have a mold surface that's going to be fairly hard and dent resistant in that, so it'll actually pop off when I'm using it as a mold surface, making my other sections. So I'm going to put a little bit of this on. I might have to use a brush to kind of spread it out a little bit, but we'll see how it goes here. So I'm actually using the thickened epoxy to fill in the corners. So kind of straightening out all the edges and corners so that my fiberglass that I have cut here, when I lay my 2 or 3 pieces over it, has a flat surface to go across. The detail will be coming from the thickened epoxy. So now I'm going to set that aside because I've got everything kind of filled in how I want it. I've got some brushes here, and I've got some unthickened epoxy. Once again, it's the 105, 205 Fast Hardener, and I've got my pieces of fiberglass. I'm going to start out with my biggest piece of fiberglass here. It's got a little bit of fringe on the bottom, but that's fine. I'm going to lay it in place. Use a brush to kind of move it around where I need it to be. I'm going to use a little bit of epoxy. Start wetting it out. Okay, so I just have a little bit of epoxy on there, not overly wet. You can kind of see the glossiness on the surface. So I'm going to lay my next piece of glass in there. I'm keeping in mind to overlap this upper edge. So I've got a little bit of a shelf that I'm building there. And this will kind of change colors as you're kind of laying it down in here. The weave of the cloth will slowly disappear. Then I'm going to put my third and final piece on here. I think that'll be stiff enough. If it's not, I could always add more once I pull the mold off the surface. And I'll have to do a little bit of trimming, sanding, possibly cutting my shape and that, trimming the edges a little bit so I don't have any sharp or burr edges for making my molded pieces or molded sections. That'll do it. On my little splash mold that I've made here, I let it cure overnight. It's nice and hard now. You can see on the edge a little bit, it's a little bit on the stiff side, so that's good. I'm gonna have to take a putty knife or something and get underneath it and lift up slightly. It'll probably take a little bit of effort to pop it loose, but it should pop right off here. Got my tape up on this side a little bit and a little bit on the back edge. I think I'm just gonna try to lift and work this side. Oh, there we go. Got a little bit of movement. Oh, there we go. Actually, some of the tape stayed and the mold actually popped off. So it's actually the reverse shape of all my curved surfaces. So it actually looks like it came out pretty nice. All right, so I will trim my piece up to then use my mold onto the rest of my surface. The surface needs to be sanded to remove any loose and old paint, and that'll allow the epoxy to bond to the surface better. Okay, so now that my mold piece has been made, I've removed it from the surface and I've pulled the packaging tape off. I've trimmed it to shape so it sits on here nicely and actually moves all the way along where I'm going to be using it to mold my new molding in place. In that process, my little piece of wood that was stuck on here that was up on top, when the sanding process, I've actually broken it off. It was just attached here in the corner. So I'm going to use some 5-minute epoxy to bond this in place. So then I can kind of keep moving on with doing my filling and so forth for my molded shape. I still have a little bit of paint on the surface that's down in little low spots of my trim work. That'll be fine because the majority of the paint is gone. Even the areas that there's still a little bit of paint in, I've sanded down into a fair amount. Instead of removing a bunch of wood to get down to remove all the paint, I'm just going to end up filling over top of it. So I'm just using our G5 epoxy at a 1-to-1 mix ratio. I've got enough in here that I can stir together and more than enough to do my bonding operation. As I'm stirring it together here, I'll still stir this probably for my 1.5 to 2 minutes. It's a little bit thicker in viscosity than our normal 105 system that we've been using on other parts of the door. So I'm not worried about putting any filler in it to take up any differences between my piece of wood that I broke off that I'm bonding back on. The 5-minute epoxy will be thick enough itself to fill any of those little gaps that are there. I will use a small acid brush, is what we call them, small brush to coat out both pieces. Brushing some on both surfaces, on the door, and then I'll do my little broken off piece later. You'll notice as you coat this out, or as I'm coating this out, you'll see that the area that I get the epoxy on will be a little bit darker in color. That's just it getting wet from the epoxy itself. And there again, I want to have enough on the two surfaces so when I do squeeze them together slightly, I'll see a little bit squeeze out. And any other cracks or splits that happen to be in the little piece of wood here, I've kind of filled those in or tried to work some epoxy in those so the whole surface will be covered. All right, so this is going to go back in here like so. Push it down and in. And I do have some tape here ready to go for my little clamps. I may have to come back in and put some other little pieces of tape in, but this looks like this is going to do a pretty good job. And I'll give that 5 or 10 minutes to cure. So as my epoxy is curing, I'm prepping my mold surface for other operations. Okay, so I'm just cleaning any loose stuff off the back of my little mold piece here. Goes on the surface, fits on there nice and snug. And I've got a little bit of discoloration on the back side from sanding dust and so forth, so I'm just wiping that off. And then I'm actually just going to use packaging tape as my mold release surface, just kind of like what I used for when I made this. I'd put my packaging tape down and tucked it on all the little corners to make my piece. I'm going to use that to be my mold release on my part that I made now to finish making my trim piece. I'll use a little more than what I really need so I can work it down into the surfaces. Sticking over the edge a little bit. And then I'm just gonna work it down with my fingers into all the little grooves and indentations that are here. And I probably, when I do my little molding operation with my mold that I have here, I probably won't put epoxy across the whole surface. It'll kind of be the kind of cove or radius joint I have here, and then there'll be a step to get to the top. The bottom portion is still pretty good all the way across. I have some few little spots that I may come back in and do a little bit of filling on and using the mold to recreate that shape. But I'm mostly going to use it for creating this upper portion. As you can see here, it is missing. I just have the radius and it doesn't even come up to my 290s to make a flat surface. Just pulling my tape. Looks like it's cured up well enough. Now I'll just need to come in and do a little bit of sanding on the surface to smooth everything off again. So as I'm checking my molded piece that I now have my tape on for my mold release, I'm just going to slide it across the surface, make sure that it stays nice and tight. There isn't anything really pushing it up. It'll stay there pretty easily and slides across the surface real easily and smoothly. So I won't have any highs or lows or anything kind of out of whack. So now I'll have to come down here and do, keep it on some of the old surface that's there, and then I'll fill in with some thickened epoxy over the area that I need to rebuild. Back to using my 105-205 resin and hardener. Then I'm going to add some 410 Microlight to it to thicken it up to do my molding with. So I'll get this mixed up. I'm going to do what we call a two-stage bonding. So I'll take another little brush and brush on some of just the clear resin and hardener onto my surface, and then thicken it up and put the thickened epoxy over top of it. I'm going to take a little bit of my epoxy now, brush that in so it'll soak in on the surface. I'm going to mix up some of my 410 Microlight into my 105-205. With our low density fillers, as you mix them into the epoxy, you get a larger quantity of mixed epoxy from when you started. So this won't quite double, but it'll get considerably more material here to work with as I get it to the consistency I want. I'm still scraping the sides and the bottom to make sure that I get all of the filler mixed into the epoxy. So now you can kind of see it's a lot stiffer and thicker. That's about the consistency I'm going to be looking for to do my buildup. So what I'm going to do now is apply this to my surface, and I'm going to put the thickened epoxy on first, and then I'll put my mold into that. So that looks like it's built up nice and proud. So now I can come back in with my molded surface and put it on there. So I'll just put it right in place. I'm going to go past where I've got it thickened out to a little bit. I just set my piece in here, and I'm going to work down starting from the side that is solid already, coming from my wooden pieces, so I can hold that down and then push it kind of down in place. I'm going to be down on the, I'm going to call the bottom edge of my mold to kind of create that shape and get it down in place. Looks like I'm pretty much there. I'm going to take another stir stick, because I've got stuff kind of dripping off the back side, and kind of fill in slightly here. So I'll just scrape it off a little bit and use the top edge of my mold to fill in any little voids. Odds are I'll probably have to come back in and do another light skim fill over this surface. If you leave it a little bit proud, a little bit high, you can sand it down. The 410 Microlight sands very easily. And staying down there nice and tight. It's not really moving around unless I'm pushing on it. So I think I'm just going to leave it alone. I don't know that I'll even need to tape it. I'm going to have a little bit of filling I'll have to do on top, but I think that's going to be easier to do once I have this base filled in. Now that our epoxy is cured, I'm going to sand both the back or top face a little bit. So I'm going to try to pull my mold off here. I'll have a little bit down in my radius that I'll have to clean up. Take a little bit of sanding to get that nicely squared up. And that's going to be pretty close. I'm going to have another little fill that I'll have to do on it to fill in all my little low spots here and there. But overall, it's come out pretty nice. I've got the shelf basically built back and just have to finish sanding my other areas and everything. Then it'll be ready for some paint. For our window shelf that we had to make our little mold for, the tape down, remember doing all that, and then moving it out so we could do a couple out on the edge to recreate this edge in that was all broken off and wrecked. It's come back pretty nice. Once again, we've painted the epoxy and the wood surface with the primer. Basically a light sand on everything. It should be ready for top coat paint.